David Peterson delivered the gutsiest start of the season. Juan Soto finally got his big hit, and Brett Baty stayed red hot.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week. And this weekend, as I mentioned on yesterday's show, is the exact reason why. Because you have a series like this that deserves coverage every day because of the crazy mood swings that you have as a fan watching a team throughout a regular season, where on Friday night, the Mets have what felt like the most devastating loss of the year to go from a incredible high of a ninth inning comeback where you think the Mets are going to pull off a come from behind win over the Dodgers to then failing time and again in extra innings to losing that game and wondering, what does Saturday hold? This team is going to need so much out of David Peterson because every single arm in their bullpen was used to cover 11 innings on Friday night in a rain-soaked marathon game. So I do that show for Saturday morning, breaking down all of it. What do the Mets do with their roster? What did we just watch? That crazy game. But Saturday, you have this game, an incredible one. And if I had to wait till Monday to record, I wouldn't get to cover the roller coaster the right way. So let's just go through this game. And there's going to be plenty of time to talk about this offense because the offense was great. Brett Baty continues to be amazing. Juan Soto got his big hit. The Mets went 4 for 11 with runners in scoring position, which is a marked improvement for this team. Every single hitter in the starting lineup got on base in the game. 7 of the 9 hitters got hits. It was a really good offensive performance by the Mets. But I have to start with David Peterson because David Peterson was so crucial to the Mets in this game. And there are certain times in a season where the starting pitcher knows, tonight, this is my game. Yes, every time you start, you should have the mindset that you're going to go out and win the game. But in this type of an outing in particular, you need your starting pitcher to take the burden and the responsibility of getting deep in the game for the team. And that's what David Peterson did. I thought this was the best start of the season, considering the context of what happened the day before and how well he pitched against that Dodgers lineup, making Shohei Ohtani look human, as Carlos Mendoza said after the game. What Peterson did in this start was awesome, and it just continues what's been, a 2-year evolution for David Peterson after that hip surgery of coming into his own. I was thinking about it before I recorded tonight, and you could say that over the past decade, this is the best pitcher the Mets had developed because we're now 10 years removed from the 2015 New York Mets that graduated Noah Syndergaard and Steven Matz a couple years after graduating, Matt Harvey and then Zach Wheeler and Jacob deGrom. So if you think about the pitching prospects of the past decade, there hasn't really been much of any since that last generation that came up together. There's been guys that were sent out in the Marcus Stroman trade, Anthony Kay and Simeon Woods-Richardson. Simeon Woods-Richardson has become a starting pitcher in the big leagues. I think Anthony Kay is pitching overseas now. And I'm trying to think of other arms that the Mets have had in this system that have passed through. It's really been, over the last couple of years, just David Peterson and Tyler McGill. And while there's still hope for McGill to establish himself, David Peterson has fully arrived. He is a really good starting pitcher. Is he ever going to be your absolute ace? Maybe not. But this guy is about as good of a number 3 starter as you're going to find. And I don't mean that as any insult. He's not the type of guy that you call an ace. He might not be the type of guy you call a frontline starter, but he's a really good starting pitcher that just has a slow heartbeat. We saw him pitch well in October. He just has good enough stuff. He's a big lefty that just can attack hitters and get the job done. He kept the ball on the ground all night long. It was just such a go back to just a gutsy start by David Peterson. He got 23 of the 27 outs for the New York Mets in this game. Goes 7 2/3, matching a career high. Opens up the game with a 1-2-3 inning, striking out Shohei Ohtani and Teoscar Hernandez in that inning. Second inning, the inning that he gives up a couple runs, he got BABIP to death. And what that means is batting average on balls put in play. Sometimes balls are put in play that just end up being hits that probably shouldn't be hits. And you look at that inning, that's exactly what happened. Freddie Freeman hits a shallow fly ball that gets caught. Then Andy Paez hits a shallow fly ball. Juan Soto gets a pretty bad jump on it. He probably should have made that catch. It ends up dropping right in front of him at his feet. So that's the first hit. He hits Tommy Edman with the pitch. He then gives up a single to Kike Hernandez that on a normally shifted infield with Lindor playing in your normal shortstop position, that is a routine ground ball. Instead, they had the infield shifted to the left, and it ends up being Jeff McNeil that has the best shot to make the play, coming from the other side of the bag, trying to dive and make the stop. He can't get there. That ends up resulting in the first run of the game. The second run of the game for the Dodgers comes on a ball that hits off of Dalton Rushing's shin guard. He fouled it off himself, but no umpire saw it somehow. I swear the umpiring, the umpires, whatever you want to say, they've been terrible this year, and that was another example of it. But regardless, it's an out for Peterson. He gets another ground ball, gets out of that jam, which, again, there was no ball hit hard in that jam. And then from that point on, there was pretty much no Dodger rally. The closest thing to it was Teoscar Hernandez hitting a 2-out double in the third inning, but David Peterson promptly got Freddie Freeman to ground out to end the threat. From that point on, from the fourth inning through the seventh inning, David Peterson faced the minimum in 4 consecutive innings. Fourth inning is a strikeout, walk, double play ball. Fifth inning, strikeout, ground out, strikeout. That second strikeout in the inning coming against Shohei Ohtani. Sixth inning, leadoff single, double play ball, ground out. Seventh inning, leadoff single, ground out, where Tommy Edman was able to beat out a potential double play. Then he gets another double play ball right after that. Brett Baty makes a great turn to Luisangel Acuna. Pete Alonso makes the pick to complete the double play, and that got Peterson through 7. Across those 4 innings, the 4th inning to the 7th inning, Peterson only threw 41 pitches. That put him in line to go into the 8th inning at 88 pitches. That is so huge when you think about how taxed the Mets bullpen was. They got Edwin Diaz up in that 8th inning to get more than 3 outs for a save, and the target point for where he was going to come in was Mookie Betts in the lineup. Betts was due up 4th in the inning. But they wanted Peterson to face Ohtani again because he looked that good against the second best hitter on the planet, to Aaron Judge in Ohtani. He strikes out Dalton Rushing to open up the 8th, walks Miguel Rojas on 4 pitches. A little bit of a surprising walk, but who cares? Because he then strikes out Ohtani again for the 3rd time in the game. Ohtani 0 for 4 against Peterson. And Peterson gets a standing ovation as he comes off the mound. Just an awesome start by David Peterson. Carlos Mendoza comes in to face Mookie Betts, strikes him out, strikes out Teoscar Hernandez and Freddie Freeman in the next inning, and then gets a ground out to end the game. So Diaz looked dominant as well. The Mets were able to stay away from everybody else, and they were able to get this victory. Just a really incredibly well-pitched game by Peterson, and then Edwin Diaz, who, don't look now, but Edwin Diaz looks like Edwin Diaz again. He's got a 2.53 ERA on the season, 30 strikeouts and 21 1/3 innings pitched, and he looked lights out in this one. I mean, you were seeing that great run on his fastball. You were seeing that sharp slider. When Edwin Diaz starts looking like that, you remember why he got the contract over $100 million, because he can be just that good. So really just an awesome game by David Peterson that had to be spotlighted to open up the show, but that's not to bury what happened on the offensive side of things, because it was a really good game for the Mets. Juan Soto, Brett Baty, both coming through clutch. I want to talk about what they did and what this lineup did in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And it's not just the NBA action. You can look at the MLB action. Pete Alonso is on the longest home run drought of his career. Any day now, he's due to hit a home run, particularly once the White Sox come into town. But I don't know. Landon Knack, to me, that's a pitcher I could see Pete Alonso going deep on. So maybe you look at the game tonight and say Pete Alonso home run prop along with the Mets to win. Combine that, try to win big. And if you're new to FanDuel, the perfect time to sign up. You can head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. Now, this game was a complete team effort offensively. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, every single guy in the starting lineup got on base. But there's a few guys that really stand out, Brett Baty and Juan Soto. Baty got the Mets on the board in the second inning, capping off what was a great two-out rally by the bottom of the Mets lineup. Jared Young got things going. I'm going to talk about Young a little bit in the final segment today, one of the two roster moves the Mets made ahead of this game. He was able to get on via hit by pitch. Tyrone Taylor got a base hit. Then Brett Baty comes up and comes through, finding a hole between the second baseman and the first baseman for a single that drove in Jared Young. I love Brett Baty. Right after he got that hit and saw the ball get into the outfield, the way he looked into the dugout and he was firing up his teammates, I thought that was such an awesome moment for him. He's playing with so much confidence right now. You got to love it. Third inning, the Mets had some tough luck as Juan Soto got a base hit. Pete Alonso ripped one into left center field that was cut off, so it was only a single, but Soto goes first to third. Seemed like it had the makings of a nice rally. Jeff McNeil hits one hard down the first base line, but Freddie Freeman was parked right there, made a great play on it, turn two. That ended a rally for the Mets, but it felt like they were building up against the dam with, rally after rally, and finally that dam broke in the fourth inning. Luis Torrens hit a leadoff single. Jared Young and Tyrone Taylor each get out. So another 2-out at bat for Brett Baty. He draws a walk. Francisco Lindor draws a walk to load the bases. Then the Mets get fortunate. Starling Marte with a check swing base hit on a chopper that goes over the pitcher's head. The shortstop, I guess, was probably Miguel Rojas, right? He comes on to make the play, and there just was no play because that ball was chopped so high in the air, and Marte was busting it down the line. He didn't even try to throw it to first to get him out. Everybody's safe. The Mets tied the game there, and they keep the bases loaded for Juan Soto, and Soto delivers. He took a pitch. I think it was the 2-2 pitch, a slider inside that most guys won't take. You look at the pitch tracks, it was a ball, but it was a gutsy take, and that's what Juan Soto has done throughout his career, because then the next pitch he gets is a better one to drive, and he certainly drove it into right center field, hits off the top of the wall for a double, sort of carry him perfectly, and so they weren't able to get all three runs across. Starling Marte thrown out at the plate because of a perfectly executed relay by the Dodgers, but the damage was done. A game-winning double for Juan Soto, and Soto was really good in this game outside of a little bit of the defense, but regardless, 2 for 5, hit the ball hard in each of his first 4 at-bats. First at-bat of the game for him, he drives one into right center field with an exit velocity of 102.5 miles per hour and a launch angle of 28 degrees. That ball goes out most times, okay? If you hit the ball that hard with that launch angle, maybe not to that exact spot, but typically, and as Carlos Mendoza said after the game, once the summer months hit and it gets a little bit hotter and the ball starts to carry a little bit better, that would have been a home run. He hit that ball very well. Instead, it was caught. So that was the first out of the game for him. Then he hits the ground ball single, but it was 102 miles per hour off the bat. then has that game-winning double, 108 miles per hour off the bat. Then he flies out in his fourth at bat, but again, 102 miles per hour off the bat. He did get under that one, launch angle of 40 degrees, so it would have been a flyout regardless of the weather. But it just shows you that Soto is back to squaring up the baseball again, because that's the thing. Throughout most of the season, what we've seen from Juan Soto, he has hit the ball hard a lot. It hasn't always been rollover. Now, there's been a lot of rollovers in situations with runners on base. They showed a stat during the game today. He has as many double play balls hit into this year as he did all of last year. I think they said he leads Major League Baseball in double play balls so far this year. It's an ugly stat. But I think the difference from the slump that we just watched, which began pretty much with this Subway Series, was just the at-bats weren't even good anymore. Where I feel like for most of the season, even though the results weren't there, the at-bats still largely look good. He was still swinging at the right pitches, taking the right pitches, hitting the ball hard at times. He just wasn't very fortunate, and he wasn't coming through with runners in scoring position. Tonight, he comes through with runners in scoring position, gets a couple of hits, hits the ball hard every time. I feel like maybe he has finally put everything past him and is going to get back into his process. And I really think when you look at the road ahead, Landon Knack, who has not been very good this year, pitching on Sunday Night Baseball, and then you get to hopefully tee off against the White Sox and the Rockies. I think Juan Soto has a pretty good week in store here. So hopefully this was the beginning of a turning point for him. Brett Baty, on the other hand, just continues to stay hot, and he came through in the 8th inning. Soto did not. He did have his one bad at bat of the game because he rolled one over in his final at bat in a base load situation. But before that, Baty got an insurance run in. He comes through with an RBI double. Luis Torrens started off another rally with a base hit. Mark Vientos hit by a pitch. Tyrone Taylor flew out. Baty then ripped a line drive into left center field to score Torrens. Baty on the game went 3 for 3 with a walk, improved his OPS on the season to 799. And you look at what he has done since he's come back up. In 15 games played in May, Brett Baty is 14 for 43. That's a 326 average. He's got a 356 on base percentage, a 698 slug, 5 home runs, now that one double, and 13 RBIs. He has just been honestly the best hitter in the lineup for a couple weeks. It's been amazing to see. And he's earning that everyday role at third base for the time being, especially right now with Jesse Winker out. Very easy to have Mark Vientos DH some. You could play Vientos at third base some with Brett Baty sliding over to second. This kid has to play every single day at this point. You just got to keep him in the lineup. Now, Luis Torrens deserves a little bit of credit too. You can make an argument that the Mets should be starting Luis Torrens over Francisco Alvarez. They won't. I don't think that they're going to bench Alvy because he is so important to their future and their present. He's a leader on the team, and he still hasn't completely gotten his feet under him, still doesn't have a ton of at-bats to really draw sweeping conclusions on who he is as a hitter this season. But Torrens deserves to play, and I wouldn't even hate it if at times the Mets decided to even squeeze Torrens a DH day every now and then. I wouldn't mind seeing Torrens in the lineup over Starling Marte is the way I would rationalize that one, just because the guy keeps hitting 2 for 4. He started a bunch of rallies in this game, scored a couple of runs. Pete Alonso, his hits didn't amount to much, and he did get picked off in pretty brutal fashion, but I want to still acknowledge he had a 2-hit game, and hopefully that means he's starting to turn a corner. Lindor was the one starter outside of Jared Young that did not get a hit. Young, though, only got 2 at-bats, got hit by a pitch, and he popped out before Mark Vientos came into the game. But with Lindor, he did at least draw a couple walks. So hopefully that 1 through 3 that I talked about in yesterday's show is starting to turn a corner a little bit. And when you add Brett Baty in the 9 hole, all of a sudden, I guess it's not a 1 through 3 anymore now that they moved Soto and Alonso down. But regardless, your 3 best players hopefully are starting to turn a corner, and Brett Baty just continues to thrive. Final segment today. Still have a bunch on the docket. Frankie Montas made a rehab start. I'll tell you what happened there. The Mets made 2 roster moves. So what does that mean for this team moving forward? I will go through all of it in just a minute. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better fuel unsaturated fats to help you feel fuller, longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety of Wonderful Pistachios. It is the perfect grab and go snack, and I love my smoky barbecue flavor. I also am a big fan of the honey roasted. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, if I'm going on a road trip, or I'm hitting the golf course, this is the perfect quick protein boost that is always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. If you're an everydayer that's always tuning into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways, and get a live graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, let's talk about the 2 roster moves the Mets made prior to the game on Saturday. They called up Jared Young and Brandon Waddell from Syracuse, and they DFA'd Jose Azocar and Genesis Cabrera. We'll start with Jared Young. I spoke a lot about Young on yesterday's show because I was wondering if one of Brandon Nimmo or Mark Vientos was going to end up on the IL. Both of them were scratched on Friday. Vientos before the game. Nimmo was pulled from the lineup after a couple of innings with neck soreness, and you just didn't know if those guys were going to be available. Now, Vientos obviously played tonight off the bench, so he's clearly good to go. Nimmo still day-to-day, and I would not be surprised at all if we don't see him, especially on Sunday, but if not, a little bit into next week as well. They don't want to put him on the injured list. They want to give him a little bit of time, but that still means you're playing a man down in the process. So instead of having Jose Azocar on the roster, who was barely playing, you add in Jared Young. And Jared Young is the guy that I spoke about in yesterday's show as a potential injury replacement or somebody that you could bring up for even a Luisangel Acuna to give you some another option at second base, at third base, at first base, at left field and right field. He homered in 4 of his last 10 games played in Syracuse, 917 OPS on the season there. If you missed yesterday's show, I told you about how Jared Young was signed this offseason after playing a little bit in the KBO last year. He was a Cubs prospect for some time, put up some big numbers in AAA, never quite got a full shot in the big leagues. Last year, he signed with the Cardinals, had some good numbers through 75 games, asked if there was any chance that he was going to come up, didn't really get that opportunity or wasn't going to get that opportunity. So he went and played in the KBO for a little bit, put up some big numbers, and the Mets signed him to a major league deal, knowing that he still had options. So he's a very flexible piece on this roster because they can send him back down to AAA at any time, but he gives them real depth, and now we're going to see them tap into that. I don't know if Jared Young is a long-term fixture on this roster, but I think he's a really nice placeholder for now. Definitely you can get a lot more out of him than you were getting out of Jose Azocar. And for the next couple days with Nimmo out, he gives you another left-handed bat. I also think even when Nimmo is back in the lineup, I would not mind seeing Luisangel Acuna's playing time come down a little bit, particularly his starts. And I got into it more on yesterday's show, so I don't want to drive it into the ground again. But the bottom line is this guy's not hitting. And I think he is destined at this point, unless he snaps into gear really quickly, I think he is destined to go and play a couple months in Syracuse, maybe starting at some point in June and getting all of July, maybe all of August. And then in September, you can see Acuna come back and play a big role on this roster again after he develops a little bit more as a hitter. But I'm looking at Ronnie Mauricio as a potential option. But as I've talked about on Friday's show, where I was really getting into the timeline of Mauricio, and I touched on it again yesterday, I don't think Mauricio is going to be ready for a couple weeks, and I don't think the Mets should force him up. So for right now, while you're still getting the legs under Mauricio, I don't think it is the worst thing in the world to have Acuna play a bench role, which we know he is able to thrive in as a guy that can play the second half of games, where he can come in after whoever got the first 3 at-bats, whether that's Jeff McNeil, whether that's Starling Marte, whether that is Brandon Nimmo on certain occasions, and you slide McNeil into left and you have Acuna play second base, whatever it is. Acuna can finish every game for you at second base because of his defense, and he can provide you an elite pinch runner that you get to drop into the game on base. He doesn't have to get on first base if he's a pinch runner. Somebody else gets on, perfect. Now, if you need a run late, Acuna can come in, steal second, score a run on a base hit, and that's how he can provide more value as a bench player than as a guy that's going to be going out there every day at second base. And the way that Brett Baty's swinging it, his ability to play second base, keep Vientos in the lineup, and do something else with their DH spot, I think this was a really good move right now. And once Jose Siri is ready to maybe play that pinch running role, I think that's when you could see the Mets make a switch and send Acuna down. Or if Ronnie Mauricio proves ready, that could be another move for the Mets. Right now, they're going to need Acuna's speed on the roster. And Jared Young does not provide that, but Jared Young gives you another bat in the meantime. So I think that's where the Mets are at with Jared Young. I don't think he's going to be a long-term fixture unless he really, really hits. But I think he is a bridge to Ronnie Mauricio, and that's how I'd view him on this roster right now. Now, when it comes to the pitching side of it, Brandon Waddell comes up as the fresh arm. I did talk about that on yesterday's show as well, that he made the most sense to be brought up. I thought there was a couple ways they could bring him up. One was if Brandon Nimmo or Mark Vientos was going to hit the IL, you could do the exact same maneuver the Mets did earlier in the season when Jose Siri went down, where they kept Siri on the roster a couple extra days so that they could option Max Kranick down and call him back up for an injured player. Obviously, it does not seem like either Nimmo or Vientos is going to need an IL stint, so that was off the table. The only other option to keep Genesis Cabrera and Jose Castillo, your 2 lefties in the bullpen, was to option Max Kranick down, and you would not have him for the next 15 days. The Mets instead opted to make their decision on which lefty reliever they were going to keep, Jose Castillo or Genesis Cabrera, and they DFA'd Cabrera, exposing him to waivers. We'll see. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he latched on with another bullpen because he looked fairly good with the Mets, but they really like Castillo. He's their lefty, and they have Paul Blackburn nearing a return, so they were going to have to make that decision very soon anyway, whether it was going to be optioning Kranick or getting rid of one of the lefties. So they make this move now. Brandon Waddell stays on the roster for this series, maybe even a little bit into the next series, because Paul Blackburn is going to need his 4 days rest before he can make a start. I don't think he will make a start necessarily, but I think they'll still give him that rest, which would mean he would be good to go on Tuesday. So I would expect Waddell to maybe stay in this bullpen for 2 more days. Granted, if he's used on Sunday or today, as you guys are listening to this, then they might just make the move to Blackburn for Monday. Maybe he can pitch out of the bullpen on 3 days rest. Now, to figure out the Blackburn thing, we will probably continue to discuss this as the Mets start making the moves, but they have announced their starting pitchers for the White Sox series. So I think the plan is to have Paul Blackburn pitch out of the bullpen. That means that it's going to be Kodai Senga tonight, Clay Holmes on Monday, Tyler McGill on Tuesday, Griffin Canning on Wednesday. The other option would have been to go right to the 6-man rotation and pitch Blackburn on Wednesday. But Canning had his start shortened by rain, only through 50 pitches. He doesn't need extra rest. So it makes sense to have Canning pitch on regular rest. Actually, it might even, it would be regular rest. Got a little confused for a second because of all the off days, but he pitched on Friday night. So again, regular rest for him. That's your next series. You have a day off on Thursday. Then it will go back to David Peterson, Kodai Senga, and Clay Holmes against the Rockies next weekend. And then you go to LA to face the Dodgers. Tyler McGill would start game 1 of that series. And you would not need Paul Blackburn until Kodai Senga's turn on June 5th. So what does that mean? To me, the move is keep Waddell for a couple days, slide Blackburn in on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, depending on when you decide to, and then Blackburn can pitch out of your bullpen for most of that week. The one day he wouldn't be able to pitch would be Sunday, because you want to make sure that he'd be good to go on 4 days rest at least to pitch on June 5th. And then the Mets will roll with a 6-man rotation for a little bit, I would think, or it could be a spot start for Blackburn. And I think because of the off days, you might be able to stick him back in the bullpen potentially. So the Mets might be flexible with how they use Paul Blackburn, but they have him completely stretched out, and he will be part of this team next week. So Brandon Waddell's cameo on this roster will not last long. Now, Frankie Montas, speaking of pitchers coming back from injury, he made his first rehab start on Saturday, pitching in Brooklyn, faced 6 batters in the first inning, gave up a walk, a single, and a triple. 2 runs came across. He then faced 2 batters in the second inning, got 1 out, walked another batter. But the most important thing was he got on the mound. He had, 2 ups, pitching in 2 innings, got up to 37 pitches. I imagine the target was 35 to 40. So next time out, you're thinking maybe 45 to 50. You typically want to add 15 pitches each time, but sometimes a little bit less than that. And you want to add an inning each time. I imagine you're looking at maybe 4 more rehab starts at least, if not 5. So you're probably looking at anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks from now where Frankie Montas could be ready to return. I would imagine mid to late June for Montas, and they say that Sean Manaea is 2 weeks behind, so maybe early July for him. So this rotation is getting healthier and healthier. Right now, the way things have gone, I think at the moment, Tyler McGill is the one guy on the hot seat in this rotation. I think there's no removing any of David Peterson, Clay Holmes, Kodai Senga, or Griffin Canning. And ultimately, if everything goes perfectly, you would have a 6-man rotation that would include those 4 guys plus the 2 injured pitchers in Montas and Manaea. Maybe Blackburn takes to a bullpen long man role. Maybe he doesn't. Who knows? And Tyler McGill could be ending up in Syracuse at some point. But I think that's where the Mets are trending. But so much can happen while these guys are rehabbing. Other guys can go down, not perform well. It's all fluid. But that's where the Mets are at with their pitching staff at this very moment. Final thing to touch on, the game tonight. Sunday Night Baseball, all national games. Can you imagine if you're a Dodgers fan and you love your local broadcast? How does that work? Are you just always forced to suffer through nonstop national broadcasts? This has been a wild weekend on that note. I don't know about you guys, but I'm missing Gary, Keith, and Ron. But regardless, it'll be ESPN again. We'll get to hear that broadcast. Or personally, I just watch the game on mute on these circumstances. And we'll see. It's going to be Landon Knack again versus Kodai Senga. Knack has not pitched well this year. Kodai Senga certainly has. Huge pitching edge for the Mets. Great opportunity to win the series, and I talked about it going into the series. This is a big, big homestand for the New York Mets. When the homestand started, there was 25 games left to play before the Mets met the Phillies. So I'm looking at this 25-game block of the Mets schedule. How can they get to a point where they are either back in first place or right there neck and neck with the Phillies and have the ability to take first place back going into Philadelphia? I can't remember the exact date of that series, but the mid to end of June. This is a huge part of the stretch because if the Mets can win this series, they got the White Sox and the Rockies coming into town. And if you can win 5 of those 6 games, so sweep one of those 2, beat the other team, you're looking at a 7-9 homestand. That would be huge for the Mets, and it would give them some momentum before they hit the road and have to go to LA to face the Dodgers. Then you got to go to Coors, where the Rockies have not been great this year, but anything can happen at Coors Field. That's not going to be an easy homestand. So I think this is a good ramp up for the Mets lineup to hopefully really hit their stride before that road trip. And if they can actually have a good road trip, all of a sudden you've gotten through more than half of this 25-game stretch, and you'll be sitting in a great position. But first and foremost, got to win tonight. We'll see if Kodai Senga can get the job done. We'll see if the Mets lineup can get all over Landon Knack. Should be a fun game. I'll be covering it all on tomorrow's show while also previewing what lies ahead against the Chicago White Sox. So I hope you all tune into that. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on social media at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button to help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today. For local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.